In life, we set ourselves what we call red lines. These are moral lines that we just simply won't cross at any cost, because we know if we do, we're doing some disservice to ourselves as individuals and maybe even somebody else if our decisions affect them. They could be quite serious red lines, such as not hurting or killing somebody or stealing, where we know if we commit these crimes, we'll feel the full wrath of the law. Or they could be more personal red lines, such as choosing not to eat meat or not to drink alcohol. They could be brought about by religious beliefs, or they could just be our own beliefs where we set our own moral compass, depending on our lifestyles and the people around us. But one thing that these red lines do is they often define us as people and often define how other people see us as moral characters. I think these red lines translate wonderfully into the world of photography, depending on how far we push our photographs in post-production, or how far away out of our comfort zone we'll go to make a photograph in the first place. Join me for this latest episode of Thinking Photographically, where I will help you to understand how you can set your own red lines in photography and know what is right and what is wrong for you on a personal level. As we ask the question, what are your photography red lines? Before we delve into any detail in this subject, I must stress to start off with, because it is so vitally important, that any red lines in your photography that you set must be your own. We can look outside to other influences to help make our decisions. We can look to people that we admire and look at their moral compass in photography and think, well, if they're doing that, then maybe I can do that as well. But it's really important not to blindly follow people and set your red lines to correspond with what other people have done. Because if you do that, you'll realise eventually that they're not your own. And it's then when we start to break these red lines. If your favourite celebrity, for example, has just gone vegan and you make the decision to go vegan yourself before you've even thought about what those consequences might be, then quickly you're going to find that you start hankering after meat and eggs and cheese and things. So what we must always remember is that if we are setting ourselves a red line, it is our red line and nobody else's. So then, how do we know in the first place what is right and what is wrong? Again, it's that personal decision. But the way that we can get to that personal decision comes from being a bit more worldly aware of what's around us within the photography world. The more photographs that you look at and the more photographs that you make yourself, the more easier it becomes to make those moral decisions. You might look at somebody's picture and think, well, I wouldn't have done it that way, that's going a bit too far for me. So next time you come across a similar situation in your own photography life, you'll remember that and think, I'm not going to cross that line, I'm just going to do it my way. It can also depend on the people around you. You might be a member of a camera club or photographic society, for example, and the people that share your photography and share your photography likes and dislikes and beliefs will also start to influence those red lines that you set yourself. And you can also look up to people in photography that you admire. When I started in photography, I didn't blindly follow the beliefs of just one photographer. I looked at various different photographers, different genres of photography, and started to make my own opinions and decisions based on what the people I admired were doing. It can also depend on the type of photography that you're interested in. I'm going to show you a few photographs now, and I'd like you to think when you look at them, would I have taken that photograph? Would I have taken it in that way? Or would I have done something slightly different based on my own moral beliefs? When we think about morality in photographs and pushing those red lines, I think our minds often turn to post-production, whether we should take something out or change the colour of something to improve the photograph somehow. But those moral standings can also come into play in the making of the photograph in the first place as well. Take this famous photograph by Nick Ut entitled Napalm Girl. This girl in the centre of the frame was supposedly running away from an explosion during the Vietnam War. At the time it was labelled by President Nixon as being falsified, but that was only because he wanted to subdue any anti-war feeling amongst US citizens. It also begs the question, should the photographer have made the photograph in the first place? Because these people are obviously in need of assistance. So surely the first thing that you would do is not get your camera out and take a photograph. You would rush in and help these people. But on the other hand, you've got to think that Nick Ut was on assignment, so it was his job really to make this photograph. It wasn't his job to help them. But you will be pleased to know that he did actually help them after making the photograph. The other moral side of it comes in a little bit later on in this photograph's life, when it was actually banned by Facebook because it included childhood nudity. So wherever you stand on this photograph, you'll find that different people will have different standpoints, their own red lines as they look at this photograph, which for me emphasises that feeling that we've got to make our own decisions. If Nick Ut had have stood back and thought, no, I'm not going to get my camera out for this shot, then this photograph wouldn't have even existed, never mind had the long history that it's had throughout its life. We've also got to take into account photographs that are staged. Is it right to stage a photograph? Now, when this photograph by Henri Cartier-Bresson first came out, people just looked at it as it is. Somebody jumping off a so-called ladder in a puddle into what looks like oblivion. We don't know how deep this puddle might be. We don't know how far this person's going to fall. And we could fall into Henri Cartier-Bresson's trap of thinking that it was only the photographer and maybe the silhouette in the background that knew what actually happened to this person leaping into the unknown. But Henri Cartier-Bresson is very open in saying that this photograph was staged, and that whole idea of Henri Cartier-Bresson's decisive moment, when we hear about that, maybe starts to fall down a bit, because it isn't a decisive moment if it's been staged. Surely a decisive moment is all about something in the process of happening, not something that the photographer has decided, actually, this might make a good photograph. Does that mean then that we can't enjoy the work of Henri Cartier-Bresson because we know it's staged and we know deep down that that decisive moment is a lie? Well, again, that's only a decision you can make. For me, the romanticism and the way that Henri Cartier-Bresson's photographs draw you in visually sort of surpasses that for me. So I still like his work. And you could argue that every single photograph is staged, because we all have our own opinions on what composition should be or what the lighting should be, and we all put these decisions together in order to so-called stage a photograph that wouldn't necessarily exist if we just pointed and shooted at every single opportunist moment. In terms of this photograph, the International Landscape Photographer of the Year, Kelvin Yuen, it's an absolutely stunning landscape photograph. The light is in the right place. We've got this water crashing down towards the brooding, moody sky and mountains in the distance. But this photograph celebrates aspects of photography that our eyes physically don't see. We don't see a shifting blur of water as it passes in front of a slowly exposed photograph. Likewise, the sky, we wouldn't see that jittery movement as that slow shutter speed is capturing the movement of the clouds as they billow through the scene. Does that make it a false photograph because we're not seeing it in the way that our eyes would see it in reality? Again, these are decisions that you yourself have to make. But again, for me, these are conventions of photography that in certain circumstances work. So it doesn't necessarily mean that the photographer is wrong for using those techniques. Finally, moving on to this photograph by the American photographer Peter Lick called The Perfect Storm. This is taking us on to that post-production argument and how far we push our photographs. And I suppose again it's that sense of lying through post-production or just openly making those decisions to subvert reality in what we see. This photograph is obviously staged because the moon is very rarely that size in the sky, and there's clouds actually behind the moon, which in terms of physics just would never happen because the moon is beyond our atmosphere. So we know quite blatantly that this photograph is heavily post-produced and edited to that level where it becomes almost beyond perfection because it's not what we would see with our eyes on a regular basis. Does that make it a lesser photograph? This photograph is actually on sale on Peter Lick's website for over $7,000. Does that mean that that photograph is not worth that? But I'm sure that there's somebody out there that will buy it because they just admire this photograph for what it is, a very dramatic, moody looking scene. I'm guessing that having looked at those photographs I've just shared with you, there'll be some where you thought, actually that's a really good photograph. I would have no qualms about making that photograph myself, and if I had have made it, then I would have been quite pleased. And there'll be others where you think, actually, I think they've gone a bit too far there. I wouldn't have photographed that shot like that, or I may not have even taken that photograph in the first place. I hope that goes to show that by looking at photographs and different levels of morality within photography, you can start to formulate your own ideas and set those red lines for yourselves. There's no question that those photographs have made a lot of money in their lifetimes, and that can be another reason why photographers might start to break their own red lines. I'm not saying that that's what the photographers that I've just shared with you now have done. It's just something that happens naturally. We think, well, if this is going to get me monetary gain, then maybe that's worth breaking that red line. But you could say that about stealing something. It might make you a bit more wealthy for a little while, but eventually that guilt is going to catch up with you. And if you decide to sell a photograph that crosses one of your red lines, eventually you'll start to think and question yourself morally of whether you should have put that photograph out there or started to sell it in the first place. You may say that as a photography teacher and somebody who shares videos about photography on YouTube, that I would be in a perfect position to tell you exactly where to set your red lines, to say that this is right, this is wrong, and if you go beyond that, then your photographs are disappearing into the world of incredibility. But I hope you've realised through watching this video that that's just not the case. Not me, not any other photographer on YouTube, not famous photographers that you look up to, not members of your camera club or photographic society or general photography circle is in a position to tell you what's right or wrong. What we've got to do in order to make our own decisions about where we set our red lines is get to grips with the photography world around us, question it. Say, would I have taken that photograph in the first place? Would I have pushed that photograph that far, or would I have reined it back a bit? And as soon as you start doing that, you start to make decisions for yourselves and set the red lines where you personally think your moral standing is. And by being able to do that, you're not only making your photographs more true to you as an individual photographer, you're also giving yourself an identity with the camera. You're saying, this is me, this is the way that I produce my work, and I'm proud of that. If you've enjoyed this video, or you feel that it's really readjusted your moral compass, then please give it the old-fashioned thumbs up. If you'd like to share your own red lines, or you have any other comments, then please put them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. If you haven't yet subscribed to the Yorkshire Photo Walks YouTube channel, then please do so for more content like this, and don't forget to hit that bell icon to be reminded every time we post a new video. If you'd like to learn about photography practically out in the field, or virtually as we're doing at the moment, seeing as we're still in lockdown here in the UK, then please check out YorkshirePhotoWalks.com for our latest schedule of practical photography tuition sessions. You can also follow us on social media for all of our latest news and photo walk photographs. For that, it's at PhotoWalksYorks. And if you'd like to have a look at my own personal photography portfolio online, then check out theflatcappedphotographer.co.uk. If you've never really thought about where you would put your photography red lines before, then it's something that I really wholeheartedly encourage you to do. Because not only will it help you to be happier and more content with the photographs that you make and share, I guarantee it'll also give you more confidence in yourself as a photographer behind the camera. Thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you next time.